Hey everyone, my name is Anshin Kelly, and I am an intuitive healer and traditional midwife. I would like to start by saying that I had 5 natural births, and 4 of them were free births, which means there was no midwife or medical professional at the births. You are watching Freebirth Midwifery. This evening I'm going to talk to you about the power of free birth in reclaiming women's realm in a lot of ways in modern Western culture from women ourselves. There is an extremely fine line between feeding the need and feeding greed. I would like to start off by telling you an experience that I had that has made such a deep impression on me because it exemplifies so much of what our modern Western culture is. I really feel ultimately having to learn hard lessons now from basically years of neglecting the real issues and not having true focus on what truly matters. And ultimately, the core spirit of all things, which is the energy and power of selfless love. I came across a very successful woman's blog quite a few years ago now, almost a decade ago. And I remember in the months that I followed her work, I saw that in her early work that there was probably this, more pure motivation to change hearts and warm, perhaps, frozen over consciousness in our modern culture that has led to, I guess ultimately materialism. However, over the months that I followed her and I looked through her work and I was able to see patterns in her work, historically, earlier posts and leading up, I saw that, there was a subtle but definite change, especially and most notably in her tone, in the way that she interacted with people, and the way she viewed herself. She had over time, it's interesting, she became, really almost like fixated on her identity online. And she was, just sort of obsessed with posting these pictures of herself, often pretty naked. I mean, not totally naked, but often, half naked or just a little more, meaning, half naked or 75% clothed. What was interesting is that I began to see in her later work and the way she interacted, like during the time she was interacting with me and that I met her online and stuff. She stopped showing her face more and more. A lot of the shots that she posted, which I'll give it to her, were nice shots. They were done with a nice camera phone, um, or maybe even a professional, lens. And she lived on a very nice property. And, she had a nice body and she's a fairly good looking woman. But she stopped showing her face more and more in the photos. The focus was very much on her, often half or less or more, clothed body. And that went along, a lot with the tone that she had towards people. She really took a lot of pleasure in, I could see, in humiliating people, in her comments and putting people down. She certainly lauded her so-called, natural lifestyle, which, as I was saying, that I'm sure that her motivation at first was more pure, and that she did have a um, more of a focus on a more primitive or raw or uh, you know um, naturally clean lifestyle. But honestly, like she her actually found this terminology recently online. I was like, ooh, maybe there's actually like a glint of change in the collective psyche of modern culture, where this term is money toxic person. And what has become very popular is that often women, not all, but often women will be very money toxic online. They'll be able to afford, or at least be able to depict, or the depiction online of themselves, they can afford all this very expensive, like, I happen to know, very expensive, organic, whether it's food or like magnetic yoga mats or nice, crystals, that are mined from other countries. They live a very, maybe a very nice organic life, but it certainly is very costly. And I happen to know that because my Western grandparents, were very much the early generations that began to be money toxic in that way. We're environmentally friendly and we're organic and all that. But actually, the lifestyle is actually very expensive and really not that much different, you know, energy wise, psychologically, and often even in the materialism and in the waste product is actually not that different from somebody else who might have money but isn't, so-called living this, so-called conscious, organic life. The really toxic part of that for me is that this woman, along with many others in our modern culture, is that really truly thinks that she is being the most naturalistic anyone could be, that she's kind of like the naturalistic guru goddess that everyone should follow. And this woman, over time I could see that she really started to identify herself with that person that she photographed online all the time, that person that showed off her goods, like whether it's her body or her nice property or her wealth in some other way. I suspect that, that as a young person, as a young woman, and growing up, she probably had a very empty hole inside, that she was always different, that she was always more conscious than other people, and was able to go through some life challenges and make some breakthroughs, and finally able to express this in a blog. And people were attracted to, especially women, attracted to this person who might have a more conscious way of looking at things, a more spiritual way of looking at things. But her, a little bit of success, it's amazing how quick, a little bit of success, and how truly conscious, like the truly conscious person, actually needs to have more caution, and almost like a healthy fear of the successful times, the times of plenty, than the times of famine, because it's amazing how quick, the times of plenty really distract us from the full cycle, the full cycle, the life, death, life cycle of life itself. So it became clear to me that, that success, obviously, as I would say, went to her head. But I want to kind of psychoanalyze that a little bit more. That she thought that eventually she thought that this, what her identity online and the feedback that she was getting from thousands and thousands of followers was filling that void inside that she had. But actually, her success was actually distracting her from eventually from her real work. And it didn't have to do that, but she allowed it to do that. And eventually, the line between, fulfilling or feeding the need, became about feeding the greed. A lot of these modern Western people, they are, they claim to not be egotistical, but one of the ways you can kind of see the difference between spirit or ego is that the ego loves to make declarations. The ego loves sort of grand sweeping declarations. The ego loves rah rah, oh, getting the crowd going. Like this is the way you can kind of tell is that the spirit is a very humble being, is a very consistently humble being. And the ego, an intuitive being. And the ego loves a crowd. The ego loves declarations. Whereas the spirit will only make a declaration when it's truly time. And when, whether or not there is a crowd to hear it or not, the spirit will make a declaration if it's time. And that's that. Anyway, at some point I called her out. She loved calling people out on things. She sort of declared herself or portrayed herself as this toughie, this spiritual toughie that was going to get you there, that was going to get you enlightened. And so I was like, okay, well, like, she's saying some pretty toxic things about, she has some pretty toxic opinions that are toxic because they come from a modern Western viewpoint. And it's clear as a traditional, to me as a traditional Asian woman from an international culture and community that like this woman is not exposed to the world. She doesn't have the worldview that she thinks that she does. And so I, with a lot of respect, but I decided to call her out and like I fully supported her, like had a full paragraph of like support towards her and her work and how much I appreciate her and her work. But here's the reason why. What she's saying is not a worldview. It's a very modern Western view of things, of the world. And it's not enlightened and it's not truly progressive. It's just declarative. It's declarative and it's defensive, and you're assuming a lot by not knowing a lot, and it's obvious. And I'm here to help you and support you, and as a fellow woman who actually has an international, fully international experience within my own blood and my own family. Like I can show you where your ignorant blind spots are, and we can move forward together, and we can actually connect. We can connect in this case, East and West. East and West worldview. She attacked me in a message. Like she didn't even have the ovaries to attack me in public. She attacked me in a message, and the message was all this scathing emotion and wordage, but and assault towards me, but it had really very little to do with what I was saying or the points that I was making. And the thing, I suspect after many years of prayer and reflection, that like it's because she really isn't, she hasn't been feeding the need inside herself. And so she, through coming up against another woman who might know more than her, or might actually have a full experience that she doesn't have, that she only presumes that she has. That she saw this hole in herself. And instead of saying, oh shit, like I've been greedy. I've been taking more than I have earned. You see? I'm taking more than what I have earned. And I am presuming, starting to presume. And then personally to me in the message, she put 4 feet in her mouth, but she wouldn't do it in public, So anyway, and then she does this post afterwards, like declaring how, she, sometimes she has to protect her family like a mama lion. Sometimes you have to roar to protect what's important, this declarative thing. And again, not tagging me, not being honest about what happened, And so what I did was like, well, like, fuck this. I'm going to be honest about what happened. I have nothing to hide. I didn't do anything wrong. And so I put the link to my post calling her out in that post. And thousands of people see her post. And so I just put my link and I was like, she's talking about me. And this is the post that she's talking about. It's very popular in like modern Western, so-called like awakened movements. They're very declarative. They're very egotistical, and I've been talking a lot about Instagramized birth. I've been talking about social media, like birth and social media, so-called natural living and stuff like that. I've been talking a lot about that, and these are all connected to what I'm talking about in this video regarding greed. And it's very common for people in what I call, I use Rudolf Steiner's terminology, spiritual materialism. People in the spiritual materialistic layer of modern Western society, like, there's a lot of deflection, like from their own personal responsibility. It's very popular for them to have a lot of anger towards greedy corporations, and it's like, it's okay. I mean, it's understandable to have that anger towards the greedy corporative world, and how the worlds that have the upper societies and powers that have destroyed a lot around them, and it's understandable to have that kind of anger. But the problem is I see a lot of deflection from one's personal responsibility, and this woman really, sort of brought that sort of spiritual materialism in this culture of like pseudo awakeness or consciousness or spirituality to the zenith, before, corporative greed comes from human beings. We're all human beings, greed starts here, and here. That's where greed starts. I know other women who have started and have successful businesses, and almost wear this, blanket around them that they wrap around them with all these labels, like psychological blanket they wrap around them with all these labels on it saying whatever, organic, natural, spiritual consciousness, whatever it is, radical birth or natural birth or something like that. But as time goes on, like just being the person that I am that wants to know what's underneath, that is spiritually attentive to what's underneath, and eventually, like this woman who had the successful blog, I'll be assaulted, energetically or verbally or online, and the reason is because I'm asking, like, what's under that blanket. These are all labels, but from where I'm standing, you have a successful business because you can't stop talking about yourself. I know that's difficult to hear, but the whole reason why, like, you have a successful business is because you obnoxiously talk about yourself all the time to other people. You're the center of every conversation that I've seen, whether it's, everything's about you. Almost like, people use their platforms of, they're set up to maybe at first with good motivations to help people, but then the platform becomes like, the platform says helping people, like healing people, but nobody else is actually allowed on the platform. It's just the greedy ego on the platform, declaring this to the rest of the world. It's a facade. It's not real. And that's greed. That's what greed is. And there's a reason why in a lot of spiritual traditions and religious traditions that, of course, bring this to a materialistic level, in a different way. But there's a reason why simplicity and life of, what they call sort of an old-fashioned sense of poverty. Sorry, I had to make a transition here. There's a reason why, these spiritual and religious traditions have many times at the center core of them this idea of simplicity, or an old-fashioned way to say it is poverty. That is a stripping down. It's a stripping down in order for our focus, to turn inward. It's so funny that the ego is a very tricky thing, because like now it's this trend now to be a quote unquote minimalist. I've met these minimalists. Okay, they might not have a ton of clutter in their house, but what they do own and their overall sort of focus in life is very materialistic. And more often than not, way more often than not, their attitude, if they're a woman especially, but men too, um, you know, their attitude towards birth is a very, very fearful one, very heavily reliant on corporations, corporative money. They many times they'll have these successful YouTube channels or businesses, just or Instagram feeds or whatever. It's like, what in the heck do you call that? It's not, there's nothing wrong with having success. My point is the focus. Remember, I was talking about this woman with the successful blog's tone, and how her tone changed from being, genuinely open and wishing to help people and connected to a more spiritual base, and then it became about her. Like, it became about showing everybody how much more enlightened she is than everybody else, and her proof. In fact, she kind of said this more or less, in some comments. I was like, wow, that her proof is the fact that she has these thousands of followers. It's very interesting. A lot of people right now who are, speaking out against the progressive movement's crazes and trends and stuff. It's very interesting that while I feel many of them are holding the line, holding that line and standard for womankind, and protecting, in a generalized sense, our spaces and our collective identity as women. They have they more often than not, in my life experience, they might stand up against ideas or thoughts or opinions that are assaulting the essence of what it is to be a woman, but they will have a very corporative, medicalized viewpoint about childbirth. And at the end of the day, a lot of women who make these declarations online about how so-called natural they are, and they grow all the food that they eat, and they're minimalist and all that kind of stuff. Like, I come to find out that they're extremely fearful of childbirth. They medicalize their childbirth in their own home, and they defend